At the time of this recording, we have a very special committee here that is going to preside over arguably the most incredible and important honor that could ever be bestowed upon a Major League Baseball player. And that is induction into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. Today before you brings a enlightened panel from the Baseball Banter Broadcast, and we're going to bring you our ballots. Who would make our official unofficial ballot? And at the end of this, we're going to show you exactly who would be inducted into the Hall of Fame if we were the entire voting body. To join me on this esteemed panel tonight, we have a very, very strong core here from the Baseball Banter Broadcast. We have Aiden, Roman, and Coach Ken to join me on this. How's it going, guys?
Going good.
Hey, thanks for having us as always.
Absolutely. So as we begin, we're going to be kind of reiterating here. We had to follow the same guidelines as the BBWAA, meaning the most that we could vote for in our ballots would be 10, a maximum of 10 votes, regardless of how we feel about that. As I've covered here on the channel before, I think that needs to go away, but
yeah,
we followed that rule. And some of us also partook in the fact of trying to preserve the look for certain players and not allowing them to fall off the ballot with the 5% rule, where if they don't get 5% of the vote, they fall off the ballot. So some of us are taking part in that as well. And to lead us off in our ballots this evening, we have none other than Aiden. So Aiden, take it away. Who made your ballot and why?
So first I have arguably one of the best hitters, Carlos Beltran. 435 home runs, over 1,500 RBIs, 300 stolen bases. He's the total package, in my opinion, and I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Next, I have Shen-Su Chu. Pretty underrated, I feel like, but he had a lot of good seasons. Hit 300, 3 straight seasons. No one really talks about him that much. He's a really good ball player. His stats show that. 200 plus home runs, 700 plus RBIs, 100 plus stolen bases, OPS of 824. Checks all the boxes. Next I have Cole Hamels. Very interesting pitcher, really solid pitcher. One of the best I watched growing up. I think he was always the ace, in my opinion. Really good strikeouts, eats a lot of innings, great whip, a solid ERA. Not much more you could want from a pitcher. I've got Felix Hernandez. 3 ERA again, eats the innings, gets the strikeouts, amazing whip. Probably one of the most famous pitchers in Mariners history. Really good pitcher. Deserved a ring, but never really got there. Next I have Torrey Hunter. Probably one of the better players on here. 300 home run club, 1,000 plus RBIs. He checks almost every single box in all the categories. He's never really had, like, I'd say an awful year. Never. Worst year he had was hitting 240. Next I have Manny Ramirez. He's the one that I think, if I could only pick one, he would be the one I'd pick, because he just excels in every single category. And you just can't ask more from a player of his caliber. I've got Alex Rodriguez. Controversial one, I know, but almost 4 home runs shy from 700 home runs. I mean, that says a lot. 2,000 RBIs says a lot. 300 stolen bases says a lot. Next I have Chase Utley. I feel like another underrated one compared to other players on here. Might drop for the 5%, I'm not entirely sure, but another really solid player. And then last, I have David Wright. Phenomenal player, phenomenal human being. Definitely deserves this honor.
Well, thank you, Aiden, for your ballot. And coming in second in our reveal of our ballot here is none other than Rome. So, Rome, take it away.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So for my choices, give you some insight in terms of how I selected my choices. Is I like to analyze the players for the 10 years that they existed in the league. So some of them had a 10-year spot between 2000 2010. Some had it between 2006 and 2015. Because if you really take that cross section, and for those of you who have followed the channel, you've known that I brought this up before. If you really take that cross section, you can really see the players in the element having the same exact situations that come about. So whether it's having to go to Montreal, having to deal with segregation, having to deal with this, that, and the other, you can really see a better idea of how the players are performing. So with that being said, my players are selected as such. So let's go ahead and start off with Bobby Abreu. Bobby Abreu, what's interesting, if you break down right fielders, if you go to stat, and I forget the name of the app, but anyways, if you take a look at the stats, and if you go ahead and just Google top right fielders, top 10 right fielders in hits, okay, and then you're going to go ahead and find that Bobby Abreu is in the top 10 of that list. And my other selection, which is coming up soon, is number 9 in that list. And if you take a look at everything as a whole, just in the top right fielders of all time, he's there. So, and if you take a look at when he was in his prime, 2005 through or 2005 or 2006 and 2015, you'll see again, he's consistently in the top 10 of those lists. We're talking with Miguel Cabrera, we're talking with some other Hall of Famers and lock-ins. He's neck and neck with those guys in the top 10. So in my opinion, if you're in the top 10, okay, let alone just for your section, if you will, your cross section of 10 years, you belong in the Hall of Fame because you're in that top 10 of all players offensively. And also he played solid defense, not to forget about. Additionally, he is in the top 10 of right fields of all time. So take a look at that, have a look. Bobby Abreu, I strongly feel that he is a Hall of Famer right there. Moving on to my next choice, I have to go with Nick Markakis. Yes, I said it, I meant it, Nick Markakis. Why? Let's go ahead and break down. Again, if we break down in terms of when he was the hottest during his time period, that's between 2006 to 2015, he again is in the top 10 list in hits, in at-bats, in on-base percentage. Not to mention he was a phenomenal outfielder. He had some sharp years with Baltimore, and he was kind of average near the end of his career. However, when he was in his prime, he was a very good to elite outfielder, very underrated, forgotten a lot. Career 288 hitter, nothing about his stats pop out, but if you take a look in terms of when he dominated and when he was the strongest, it's not a question. Chase Utley, to echo Mr. Aiden, he was a power second baseman. And again, if you take a look to that cross section, he's another one that is continuing in the top 6 of stats for that cross section of 10 years. Jimmy Rollins, he's about the top 8 in most categories. He's a speed threat, he's on base percentage, and of course his defense. Yes, Philadelphia is going to love me. Don't worry. At the comments field, let's go ahead and make certain you have my Amazon wish list. You're welcome. Thank you very much. I got 4 more guys to go. I'm almost done here. King Felix. King Felix is a guy who, when we take a look at cross sessions for starting pitching, when we take a look at 2005 to 2005 to 2014, he leads in strikeouts for that time period. He leads in ERA during that time period. His whip is in top 10 for every pitcher during that time. So King Felix, amongst other things, then he also threw a perfect game against Rays. Sorry, Burley. I know you did it, but you didn't make my ballot. But hey, high five to you. We got Cole Hamels again. Phillies, you're welcome. It pains me. But Cole Hamels, when we take a look at the cross-section list, Hamels, with the exception of strikeouts, has better numbers than King Felix. So if we're talking King Felix in the ballot or in the Hall of Fame, Cole Hamels has to be a selection before him. The only thing that really Hamels doesn't have that King Felix does is the strikeouts during that era, during that time period. And then the last two, I got David Wright. David Wright is, believe it or not, for Mets, he's an underrated bat. And up until researching for this topic, I didn't think David Wright was going to be somebody to make it. I thought that he had a lot of big media bias. He had a big market, so he had a lot of people, 8 million people in New York clamoring for him. He was Captain America during the WBC. All these fun accolades. Okay, great. But then when I actually looked at his stats for as a player, a lot to stand out in terms of just being top 10 continually in different categories. He did it for not just 1 or 2 years, like Mr. Chu, no offense, Aiden. He did it for multiple years, over 7, 8 years consistently. And he was a power lineup. He was a power bat in the lineup. He was consistent. He also had strong defense to boot. So all the way around, and during his era, again, he's top 10 in many categories. And then finally, Andrew Jones, just because Coach, slipped me a couple dollars before this. No, Andrew Jones, the fact that we're having this conversation at this point is criminal. There are a couple of people that, why they're not in the Hall of Fame, it's beyond me. Steve Garvey is one of them. Kenny Lofton's another one. We got Keith Hernandez, Bobby Grich, and Andrew Jones. Those people, those guys, why they're not in is beyond me, because they're good guys. I mean, if you just want to talk about for headlines, he's the reason, in many ways, that oh heavens, I was doing so well up to this point that his team in the WBC is consistently. Thank you, Curacao. Of course, the Netherlands, if you will. Thank you very much. The Netherlands is consistently doing well, is because of his influence. The things that he did for that country and that section, that culture, is amazing, representing Curacao as well. So you're talking about a good representation of Curacao. You're talking about someone who had the light shine on him and never backed away. So pick your moment. He was a elite defender. He was a clutch hitter. Again, when we're talking about my cross section, he's littered in there in terms of where he was at. If you go from 95 to 2004, he's littered in there. Hitting, batting average, hits, you name it. So those are my ballots. That's what I got. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And let's see what we got. I think it's Coach Ken next, right?
Yeah, so as we see Rome's ballot here, these are the players that made his final cut. So, Coach, you're up next.
All right. So me and Jeremy have been talking, and I'm not a let everybody in the hall kind of guy, and we kind of debate that sometimes. But I started out with a ballot kind of voting where I thought was definitely Hall of Famers, but he made a good point. You don't want people to drop off, and one of those would be Andrew Jones. I'll go ahead and start with him. I was going to do him alphabetical, but I'll do Andrew because my young man Aiden did not get to see him play much. And the only comment that you really need to know, Aiden, about Andrew Jones is Bobby Cox did see the great center fielders play. And they asked Bobby Cox one time, who was the greatest center fielder you ever seen defensively? And he said Andrew Jones. That's over Willie Mays, and who is always considered the greatest center fielder of all time. And I never in my life saw somebody cover the outfield like Andrew Jones. And you don't get in the Hall of Fame always defensively, but he was a tremendous offensive player. If there's anything Andrew Jones did wrong, is when his body started breaking down and he had problems with his back and his legs, which poor Yankee fans got him at that point was he should have just went ahead and retired.
Yeah.
His body was breaking down, and they're holding that against him. That's irrelevant. Like Roman said, in his prime, he was as good as anybody.
Oh.
Now, I didn't pick a guy that y'all both picked, but the same thing went with David Wright. So David Wright can't be in this Hall of Fame either until Andrew Jones gets in the Hall of Fame, because they almost have identical careers with their bodies breaking down, hurting their numbers. And Andrew still ended up with 434 home runs. If his body would have held up, he would have been a 500, 600 home run guy. So Andrew Jones, to me, is the no-brainer, one of the two no-brainers on here. And he should get in Hall of Fame, and I think he will get in Hall of Fame this year. Or Atlanta's going to go to Cooperstown and burn that place down. But start a new Hall of Fame. So, and for my Braves fans out there, Roman's not from Philadelphia. He's a Tampa guy. So I don't know why he wants to live in Philadelphia. But don't hate on him. He's a great guy. But the one guy that he's nailed is Bobby Abreu. Bobby Abreu is a guy that I voted for. He gave you all the numbers. He's just a tremendous player. I mean, and in his prime, Bobby was almost like an automatic hit in clutch situations. That's when he stepped up his game. And for me, the Hall of Fame, I can't judge, say, a great catcher like Ted Simmons against a great shortstop like Ozzie Smith. They play different positions. I have to judge Ted Simmons based on all the other catchers and Ozzie on all the shortstops. And when you do Bobby Abreu against the other right fielders, minus the power, he's as good as anybody that ever played the game out there. He could really hit. He could play defensively, had a good arm, and he was part of the reason the Phillies were as good as they were, was because of Bobby Abreu. So he made my list. To me, the other no-brainer that's going to get in the Hall of Fame is Carlos Beltran. Carlos Beltran is a tremendous player. And the other thing that I like about Hall of Famers is their clutch moments. And there might have been nobody more clutch in the playoffs than Carlos Beltran. There have been players as good, but nobody more. Carlos Beltran loved the big moment. And I think he will also get in. But, 435 home runs as well. And he was also good defensively. And he was an all-around player. And every team that he played on, the individuals on that team talked about how good of a teammate he was and how he led them get to better. And he meant so many wins during the season. And to me, that's the definition of the Hall of Fame. Next one is Felix Hernandez. Look, he's the second best pitcher in my eyes that ever pitched out of Seattle. We all know who the number one is. He's in the Hall of Fame. This guy, there's a reason they called him King Felix. And we said it before in some other shows, to me, you can't be a Hall of Famer or have your number retired and be in the Hall of Fame unless your own team does that. The Seattle Mariners will tell you he's one of the greatest players that ever played for him. Here's a crazy stat on Felix Hernandez. He threw 2,729 innings, over his career. That's almost an average of 7 innings a game. He averaged 7 innings a game. That's how durable he was. He was tremendous, and I hope he gets enough votes and eventually gets in the Hall of Fame. I hope he gets his due. The next guy is the guy y'all need to want to announce. I love the postseason. He's one of the greatest postseason pitchers I ever seen pitch, and that's Andy Pettitte. Andy Pettitte's a really bulldog, and how he got caught up in the whole thing with Roger going to Houston and all that stuff, I think Andy would have a better shot, and I think it's going to be held against him. But Andy Pettitte was solid. And to me, I had to pick between him and Cole. Because they're both, to me, are the similar pitchers. Very great. You could lock down, and I just picked Andy in this case, basically because I think Cole's going to stay on the ballot, and I would like to see Andy stay on the ballot so maybe he can eventually get some votes, because I think they're identically the same pitcher. Tough-minded, and you give the ball to him in the postseason, you felt like you're going to win the game. Next guy, Manny Ramirez. Aiden, you hit it on the thing. This guy, one of the best right-handed hitters of all time. 555 home runs, 996 lifetime OPS. Now, my analytics guy has all the numbers. Didn't have him on there. How do you not have a 996 OPS guy on the ballot? This guy, look, he's a goofball. But he can rake. I mean, 154 OPS plus. Wow, this guy, Manny Ramirez, I mean, he may never get in because of all the other stuff, but this guy could hit. Alex Rodriguez, Aiden's right. Man, he's got a lot of baggage. But when I said best ever played position, Alex Rodriguez was one of the best shortstops ever played the game until whatever happened. And when you saw him in Seattle, you saw something special. That kid was dynamic. I don't want him to be on TV. He bores me silly and all that stuff. But Alex Rodriguez's numbers, 696 home runs, like Aiden said, 930 OPS lifetime. I don't know how we can keep guys that have over 900 OPS out of the Hall of Fame. You know how hard it is? The average OPS guy in the Major League average is like 711. That's what the average OPS, 708 every year, something like that. I understand why he's not in the Hall of Fame, but I voted for him. I'm going to go ahead and jump to Chase Utley. Chase Utley, this is the position thing, is one of the greatest second basemen ever to play the game. We did a vintage Hall of Fame, and we brag a little bit for Roman. I did have Jeff Kent. He was the guy that got voted in, and I told him he's one of the greatest second basemen ever to play the game. And the same kind of deal, same kind of numbers, 823 OPS, 170 OPS plus, 259 home runs for a second baseman is really good. We got a second baseman down here kind of built like Chase in Atlanta named Ozzie Albies, and it's hard for second base to hit the home runs. You've seen the up and down with him. Chase was consistent. He never had the really huge year. He didn't have no weak years. He kind of knew what he was going to give you. Dynamic, running the bases. I mean, him and one of the guys you mentioned, Jimmy Rollins, who I don't have on there, were great running the bases. And just a good team leader. The part of the reason the Phillies teams were so good was because of Chase Utley. So I had him on there. Two guys I haven't mentioned I have on my ballot, Frankie Rodriguez, and 437 saves, 976 innings, 1,142 strikeouts. We're putting closers in the game. I want to at least put one closer on there, and he's the guy on there, and he was outstanding. And I don't know if he'll get in the Hall of Fame, but after me and Jeremy talking, I want to at least go to 10, and that's the guy I wanted to put on there. And the other guy I wanted to keep on the ballot was Omar Vizquel. We have guys in the Hall of Fame just because of defense. And we do. We have them. They're living in the Hall of Fame. They were just great defensive guys. Ozzie Smith gets done that way, but he was a little bit better hitter than people give him credit for. But Omar had big hits in his career. He had big postseason bats. And to me, I put him on my 10 just because I like to see him stay on the ballot because he was one of the best shortstops I've ever seen play the game. So that's my 10, and I'm sticking to it.
No, absolutely. So as we pull up Coach's ballot here in a moment, no doubt. Obviously a lot has been mentioned here as we take a look at the ballot. With several different players throughout the course of the three ballots prior. Now, before we get to my ballot, we had a couple of other members of the Baseball Banter Broadcast team that submitted their ballots to kind of help us fill in the gaps here a little bit. So we have one of our Cardinals contributors here, Scott Plaza, who's also part of the Redbird Rundown. So definitely check them out there. He put his ballot together and voted for the following players: Bobby Abreu, Carlos Beltran, Mark Burley, Felix Hernandez, Andrew Jones, Andy Pettit, Manny Ramirez, and Alex Rodriguez. We also had another one of our contributors, Chris Northrup from Northrup on the North Side here on the Baseball Banter Broadcast, contribute her ballot as well. And so her ballot consisted of the following players: Bobby Abreu, Carlos Beltran, Mark Burley, Cole Hamels, Felix Hernandez, Andrew Jones, Andy Pettit, Manny Ramirez, Alex Rodriguez, and Chase Utley. Now, as I bring forth my ballot, many of the names have already been mentioned, right? So I won't dive in too much because not much more can be said about the Hall of Fame careers of several of these players. Now, for me, the list for Hall of Fame comes down to a couple of different things. And, as we mentioned before, kind of our surefire lockdown, definitely Hall of Fame worthy players. And for me, there's a few of them, right? So Carlos Beltran, to me, is a guy that I believe is definitely going to get in. I think that he would have already been in had it not been for the 2017 sign stealing scandal with the Astros. I think the fact that it's held him out for 3 seasons now, 3 runs at this, 3 opportunities at this, is a travesty and a joke on the Baseball Writers Association of America for punishing a player who was at the time of the incident still an active player and should have been held under the same way that the rest of the players from that team were held under an immunity clause from that story in The Athletic. But Carlos Beltran is the player that got named, dropped in it, and it's affected him not only on losing the managerial job of the Mets that he had gotten hired for, but also for his Hall of Fame ballot. To me, when you look at what he has been and has done as a player, there's no doubt about it. I mean, this is a player who amongst switch hitters at that is amongst the very best in the game. If you look at his numbers, especially in comparison to just other switch hitters alone, this guy is top 1, top 2, at worst, the 3rd best switch hitter in the history of Major League Baseball. So without a doubt, Carlos Beltran deserves to get in. Bobby Abreu, there's not much more that can be said that hasn't already been covered. This is a guy that I think people are sleeping on when it comes to the Hall of Fame. I think that, they look at him and he kind of had such a smooth kind of even flow to his career that people kind of overlook that and almost, I think, takes a lackadaisical approach to studying him and his numbers. And I think that when you look at what he was as a player, it may not seem as flashy as some of the other players that we've seen, they have gotten voted in. Obviously, when you think about outfielders in recent years, like Ichiro, right? You knew watching him and the way that he played the game that he was a surefire Hall of Famer. And Bobby Abreu was just so smooth that you sometimes overlook that, right? But when you really do a deep dive and you study his case, especially as Coach said, comparing him to his peers of his position, this is one of the best of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Felix Hernandez is another guy that I think, is a tremendous candidate for the Hall of Fame. I think that when you study, especially, I think the biggest thing is, it's this year really amplifies it for me more than any other that we've had in recent memory, is that the goalposts, right? The metrics for identifying Hall of Famers is starting to change, right? And I think that especially pitchers, more than anything else, more than any other position, we are going to have to start examining them differently because pitchers are not being used in the same way that they were. We're not seeing 300 innings anymore. We're barely seeing 200 innings, if that. We might get 1, maybe 2 guys a season that may hit that 200 innings mark. We're not seeing pitchers go 7, 8, 9 innings anymore. It's 5 and fly. So as Coach said, to have a guy that averaged nearly 7 innings a game for his entire career, that is a mark that cannot be beat by today's standards. And obviously you have to compare him to his peers. And when you go through that time block, like Roman said, when you block off those years of his dominance, there was no one more fearful to see on the bump for pitching against your team than King Felix. There's no doubt about it. This is a pitcher that absolutely deserves entry into the Hall of Fame. Yes, the longevity may not be there as we would like to see from, guys like Nolan Ryan that pitched 800 years in the major leagues, but we're not seeing that anymore. So you have to be able to adjust the marks for, the current culture that we're in. And I think that Felix Hernandez is a very big example of that, but a guy that I genuinely believe is a surefire Hall of Famer. And another one is Chase Utley, right? Chase Utley is, as we've mentioned, a guy that, especially at the second base position, that to me is underrated in the Hall of Fame and kind of overlooked and overshadowed, obviously by some of the bigger power numbers from, the third baseman and the first baseman and kind of the more flash and pizzazz that sometimes comes with the shortstop. But Chase Utley, like Jeff Kent, as Coach mentioned, one of the more underrated second basemen in the history of the game. And I think that when you look at what Utley did for his career, the level of consistency that he had, it's without a doubt a Hall of Fame career for me. So for me, those are the guys that are an absolute lock. The next tier of players for me fall into 2 different categories. There's the players that I believe have been overlooked and overshadowed. And some of that is due to injuries. And that's a guy like Andrew Jones. Coach brought it up, and there's no doubt about it. When you look at what Andre was able to do for his career, this is a dynamic player. This was a guy who dominated for a long time. And yes, it is a peak case, right? And we're going to start to see more of these opportunities for these peak Hall of Famers. And I think Andre is a good case for that. This was the guy that, for a good, 7, 8, 9, 10-year stretch was one of the best players in baseball on both sides of the ball. This was a guy who was a power threat, a home run threat, and he was going to rob people of home runs on the other side of the ball. And I think that when you look at what that skill set was, especially in comparison to his peers, as was mentioned, this was one of the best defensive center fielders in the history of the game. It is not easy to be a 10-time Gold Glove winner in the National League during the stretch of time that Andre Jones was winning Gold Gloves. So without a doubt for me, I also believe that Andre Jones is a Hall of Famer. I think that he's often overlooked because of, the fall off at the end of his career. I think that's being held against him in a big way, and undeservedly so. Another guy for me that is in that spot, and this is a guy whose case I've really been championing a lot, is kind of Andre Jones light, and that's Torrey Hunter. I think that when you look at Torrey Hunter, this was a guy who, like Andrew, he had 9 Gold Gloves in center field in the American League at a time where it was very difficult to be the best center fielder defensively. This was the guy. And you also look at what he has been able to do offensively. And again, the numbers necessarily may not be what you would expect for a Hall of Famer, but I think that when you look at the totality of Torrey Hunter's career, this is a guy who deserves a longer look, and that's why he makes my ballot, because he's a guy that I do fear could fall off the ballot at 5%. And the rest of the guys that are going to be on my ballot are kind of close to that, right? The next guy who I think has a very good case, and it's going to be because very similarly to Felix Hernandez, is Cole Hamels. I think that when you look at what Cole Hamels did for his career, what he did for the stretch of time where he was one of the best, if not the best pitchers in a stretch of time where there were some very good pitchers, this guy just was quietly dominant. And I think that when you look at what his numbers were through that time frame, the 6, 7, 8 years that he was amongst the top 10 pitchers in the game, at a time where you had very big names in that. I mean, I think back to the 2011 Philadelphia Phillies with the 4 aces, Roy Halladay, Cliff Lee, Cole Hamels, and Roy Oswalt. Like, when you look at what that run was, Cole Hamels' name often gets overlooked and overshadowed because of bigger, more high-profile names, but he was one of the more consistent pitchers in that era. So I think Cole is another guy that can get overlooked in this era, but we have to start to kind of move that goalpost again, as I mentioned with Felix. And I think Cole Hamels is a guy that deserves a longer look, and I think a more deep look. Now, the next 4 players on my ballot are kind of all the same, right? And I think that, it's a fear for me that they're going to fall off the ballot with the 5% rule. It's going to be guys that dealt with some injuries in Dustin Pedroia and David Wright. I think that when you look at both of those guys, they were beset by injuries in the latter half of their career. Both guys were looked at as the emotional support, the heart and soul of their team, their respective teams, with Pedroia in the Red Sox and David Wright in the Mets. And, both players were MVP level candidate players. And I think that when you look at the possibility of them falling off the ballot, it becomes more and more real because of the fact that they did not have the longevity because of those injuries, especially at the second half of their career. So I put both of those guys on my ballot because I wanted to be able to kind of preserve them on the docket and be able to have them be their candidacies looked at and truly evaluated without the fear of falling off. And the last guy for me that I'm also worried potentially could fall off the ballot is Mark Buehrle. Mark Buehrle is a guy who, was one of the quietest assassins as a starting pitcher in the game. This was a guy who wasted no time when he was on the mound. This was just constant, just bullying, aggressiveness. And this wasn't a guy that had a blistering fastball. This was a guy who knew how to pitch, and he was going to get you out with toughness and grit. And, again, it comes down to, where do you see the line? Where do you see the goalposts moving for those, metrics and numbers that we were expecting? Pitching isn't what it was, back in the 80s, 70s, and 90s even. It's a lot different now looking at it in today's time frame and today's standards. And when you look at Mark Burley, there's no doubt that there's an opportunity there that he could fall off the ballot. But I think that his case deserves a bit of a longer look to see how his career really has unfolded through the eyes of maybe some more, advanced analytics or maybe just a little bit more time separation from the rest of the pack. But I think that Mark Burley deserves a bit of a longer look, and I don't want him to fall off the ballot. So that's why he ends up on my list. Now, before I put that list up, and kind of close it out, there was a couple of players that were mentioned, and in my opinion, if not for some of the extenuating circumstances of their case, would be right. When it comes to guys like Andy Pettit, who is involved with the steroid stuff, and that's why his case is being looked at in the way that it is, and he's kind of not getting necessarily the same respect that you would assume that he would get based on his numbers. Likewise, Manny Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez.
Yes.
These guys are, if not for the steroids, would have already been in my opinion. I think that when you look at the, players that these are two of the most feared hitters, right-handed hitters in the history of Major League Baseball. In Alex's case, and I've never been shy about it, Alex Rodriguez was always my favorite player, without a doubt. But I've been very clear on this channel and through my correspondence here that I will not vote if you have had a failed test when testing started after 2004 and Alex was suspended, right? So he didn't necessarily fail the test, but he was suspended for PEDs. And that's why I can't bring myself to vote for either one as much as I would love to. On baseballbanterbroadcast.com, our home for our in-depth articles, I penned the piece exactly speaking that about Alex and the internal struggle that I have is as having him as my favorite player of all time, but not being able to vote for his case in the Hall of Fame because of it. And so, just as much as I would love to be able to put those three guys on, especially two of them being Yankees, there's no doubt that, quality wise, they deserve to be there. But that's why they kind of were left off my ballot. So as we kind of wrap up here, I'll show you my ballot as a whole. And so in doing this exercise, in following the rules and the guidelines of the BBWAA, we had to adhere to that same idea and same philosophy. So in order for the Baseball Banter Broadcast official ballot to be accurate, we had to get 75% to see who would make the Hall of Fame. And amongst the 6 candidates, the 6 writers here, the 6 contributors here at the Baseball Banter Broadcast that penned their ballot, we got a few names that are going to go into our version of the Hall of Fame. So as we see here, the players that will be voted in according to our ballot are Bobby Abreu, Carlos Beltran, Felix Hernandez, and Chase Utley. Actually 3 of the 4 got 5 out of 6 votes in Bobby Abreu, Carlos Beltran, and Chase Utley. Felix Hernandez went 6 for 6 on our ballot, so he was unanimous amongst the crew here at Baseball Banter Broadcast for reaching the Hall. So, guys, I want to hear from you. Any thoughts on how the rest of the ballots went, on how the final tally here at the Baseball Banter Broadcast went with the 4 guys that we would vote into Cooperstown?
I want you to redo Andrew. I think Aiden's the only one that didn't vote for him.
Andrew, you're in Coach's doghouse now, dude.
Yeah, Aiden's the only one that didn't vote for him. I got to take up for the Braves here.
What
the hate is Andrew Jones got to do here? I want to say something real quick about your point on Manny and Alex. And this is for Aiden, since he didn't get to enjoy Andrew like you did. If Andrew would have done like Barry Bonds and some of them and took steroids, he could have played through those injuries. His numbers would have been better. For that alone, Andrew Jones has to be in the Hall of Fame. And that's not a knock against you. I know you hadn't got a chance to really look. You look at numbers and you see how he's held off at the end. That's because he did not take and he walks around our ballpark. We know him. He is very friendly. He sits in the stands and talks to our fans. He's that kind of guy. Like you said, he gives back to Curacao still. The only reason Ozzie Albies wanted to even play baseball was because of Andrew Jones. And to keep getting the hate because he decided not to take steroids when other people were taking the easy way out is the biggest catastrophe of this Hall of Fame. And you can't – that's why Braves fans don't even want to really support it anymore. We just had the Dale Murphy thing go through, and we sat on the show, and we had some talk about how Barry Bonds should get in and Dale Murphy. Well, Dale Murphy didn't take them either. Like, you can't ride both sides of the fences. And Andrew Jones is a Hall of Famer. And I hate it for him. Like I said, he should have retired when he had his first injuries. Or maybe he should have done like them and just not get caught. Because he would have put some numbers in. But yeah, I was waiting. Because all my Braves fans, I was telling them I was going to do this tonight. And they said, "What do you think it'll be?" I said, "I think he'll get in, but I don't know how many people's getting on the show." But Andrew Jones, Carlos Beltran, I am very pleased that Felix Hernandez got all 6 of our votes. And I don't know if he'll make it this year, but that's in Bobby Abreu and Chase Utley. So I just wanted to say that more on Andrew, that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, if anything, because he took the high road. And he put out a thing on our Braves media today, very gracious. If I get the call, I get the call. If not, it's not going to ruin my life. And he's right. That's how he looks at it. And he played all the players he played with was Hall of Fame on those 90 great runs. And every one of those guys said they would not have won those divisions without Andrew Jones. Later on a different segment, we can talk about the heart and soul of those Yankees teams that played center field. We got to start giving the heart and soul guys a chance to be in the Hall of Fame as well. That carry these teams.
Absolutely.
That's my soapbox, Roman, as you like to say. I'm off of it. Don't go.
Well, yeah, so got it updated here. So the 5 players voted in: Carlos Beltran, Bobby Abreu, Felix Hernandez, Andrew Jones, and Chase Utley. Rome, your thoughts?
Where to begin? Because Coach gave me a couple barbs during his monologue. So man, he's like, "Hey, Roman," to paraphrase, he said, "What do you think about that?" And talking about Manny Ramirez, I'm thinking, well, Coach, I'm not drinking any juice right now. I'm just drinking straight water. But no, in terms of my ballot, as you guys noticed, I did not include anybody that was under any suspicion for anything. When it comes to Beltran, he killed his own career, in my opinion, to be bold. In terms of his choices, in terms of where it's at, in terms of the anonymity, yeah, I can't say it, so you can bust me all you want. You want Beltran out, but you can't even speak? Well, yeah, fair. That's fair counterpoint. But no, in terms of, he was in many reports that were leaked out there, he was the guy that brought that system to there. So meaning that he did it earlier in his career. So as a AL East fan and having to watch him in the AL East and having to have our guys play against him, and some guys were sent down because of poor performance against him, you're darn tootin' that I'm not happy, to paraphrase the great coach. I'm not happy at all with that. So yeah, that really chafes me a little bit in places that I can't talk on this current channel. But if you go to my OnlyFans, you can watch. No, I'm kidding. But no, all jokes aside, Manny Ramirez, another guy, it's like, I mean, if we're going to talk Manny Ramirez, when are we going to start talking Jose Canseco? I mean, seriously. And Alex Rodriguez, again, he not only did he, 2-3 times was he busted? I mean, geez Louise. Oh my heavens. So not only that, but the way he handled it was embarrassing to himself, to his community, to Latinos, to many different factors. And it stinks because I thought the world of him. Number one, anyone with his last name is extremely good looking. Okay. Extremely smart. All right. So for him to have that, it's just, he had everything going for him. And for better or worse, and look, I'm not in his shoes. I can't judge, but from my perspective, if everyone was doing it, then there wouldn't be as much of this pushback as there is, because everyone would be like, yeah, you're right. No, so please don't give me that line of, well, everyone was doing it. Okay, sure. If you say so, then why is there so much pushback? Why aren't we just kind of going, hey, bygones be bygones? Why hasn't the Veterans Committee pushed those guys in if everybody was doing it? So, and we touch on that with our Veterans Committee. So, Alex Rodriguez. In terms of the other guys that didn't make it, they're really good guys on the ballot, but when looking through, because I looked through each and every one with a fine-tooth comb, if they didn't come up on my 10-year graph, if you will, I looked through to see if maybe I was missing any of them, and I wasn't. Like Chu, for example, Aiden, who I really enjoyed, $20 million a season, and he was worth his weight in gold. He was a scrappy player, in my opinion, a better version of Rusty Greer, who I personally love. And Chu, he had a couple good seasons, but nothing major, nothing consistent. And that's the same story that can be said about just about every player that we did not mention. Whether you're talking about Gordon, whether you're talking about Burley, whether you're talking about a lot of these guys that did not make it. So a good ballot, good exercise. Again, City of Philadelphia. I'll go ahead and accept my gift cards and my accolades. You're welcome. City of Atlanta, if you don't like me, my name's Dave.
Yeah, be careful. Come to Atlanta, Roman.
Yeah. If you don't like it, my name's Dave. Okay, you're welcome. All right. So, Aiden, what are your thoughts, buddy?
I mean, I don't know. I've never really seen much of Andrew Jones, if I'm being completely honest. I've seen minimum clips of him. I watch his son a lot, though. His son's one of my favorite prospects in all of baseball.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, when you go through and you sit down to really battle through this exercise, right? And I think, what I've been doing this for the last several years, right? So I've been going through and doing my official, unofficial ballot, because nobody gives me an actual ballot. Otherwise, I would make it official. But nevertheless, in putting this together this year with this crew, and having you have to go through the exercise, having you have to examine the names, and just to kind of go over some of the names that didn't make any of our ballots, Ryan Braun, Edwin Encarnacion, Gio Gonzalez, Alex Gordon, Matt Kemp, Howie Kendrick, Daniel Murphy, Hunter Pence, Rick Porcello, and everybody else was kind of mentioned by one of us or another. But when you look at these players, a lot of them would fall into the category of the Hall of Very Good, right? The Hall of a solid peak, if you will, but not necessarily reaching the longevity or reaching the heights that you would consider to have a Hall of Fame caliber career. And that's not a knock. The players that get put on the ballot, even themselves, just to be named to the ballot is an honor, and it is a distinction. To say that somebody is not amongst the top 1% of the top 1%, it is not a knock on these players, but there has to be a separation. And that's where, going through this exercise, it really allows you to have to examine the case of each and every player, examine what your criteria are to fit this particular set of rules, right? Instead of guidelines that the Baseball Writers Association of America follows to pick their nominees. And even just looking at this small sample, right, with the six of us that voted here at the Baseball Banter Broadcast, look how difficult it was to come up with players that made it. Now, obviously, because our body is smaller, we had a bigger class that went in, right? We had those 5 names that went in. When you have, the 400 and plus writers of that group, it makes it much more difficult to get to that 75% mark. And I think that, every year that we see these players coming onto the ballot, falling off the ballot, it thins the herd for some degree, but it also makes the candidacies much more interesting, and the process of going through this that much more difficult, right? And obviously this year, there wasn't necessarily any surefire first-time Hall of Famers that were going to be added. Like we saw last year, you know, you knew Ichiro Suzuki was getting in. You knew CC Sabathia was getting in on that first ballot. You know, that was really the question, whether there was going to be enough writers to say first ballot, you're in, or if they were going to make them wait. This year, there's a lot more question. This year, there's a lot more room for debate. But I think because there were no surefire Hall of Famers, you know, on the first time ballot crew, there was a lot more room for these guys to have their cases be heard. And you saw and heard a lot of those cases being mentioned here today. So, you know, I want to thank my crew here at the Baseball Banter Broadcast. I want to thank Coach and Aiden and Roman for joining me here on this video. I want to thank you guys for joining and watching us here. But we want to hear from you. That's the most important part of this. We want to hear from you, baseball fans. We want to know who would make your ballot. Would you fill out a 10-player ballot as we did in different cases here? Is there a player that you would champion the case for that we missed out on? Is there a ballot that you completely agree with from one of our commentators here? What would that ballot look like? Let us know that down in the comments section below. And of course, while you're down there, if you haven't already, as many have not yet done so, hit the subscribe button to the Baseball Banter Broadcast here, as well as the bell for post notifications, as it truly does help us continue to build and grow this baseball community here on the Baseball Banter Broadcast. We love being able to have these conversations for you guys and with you guys, and the best way to do that is to be subscribed so that you can see every one of these discussions and comment below so we can have that interaction with you. But once again, I want to thank you guys for joining me here on this video. This was a fun exercise and a fun time, as it always is, chopping it up with you guys here at the Baseball Banter Broadcast. And I want to say thank you once again for watching us here, and we'll catch you guys on the next video. Peace.